The Great Depression. It's a name we all know, something that casts this huge shadow over modern history. But here's the thing. It wasn't just one single event. Nope. It was a catastrophic chain reaction, a perfect storm of failures. So today, we're going to break down that collapse piece by piece to see exactly how all the dominoes fell.
So what really caused it? If you ask most people, they'll point to one thing: the stock market crash of 1929. But that's not the whole story, not even close. The crash was really just the trigger, the loud bang that started the avalanche. The real story is about what happened next, and about the deep cracks that were already there in the foundation of the whole global economy.
All right, let's dive right in, starting with that first massive domino, the stock market crash that brought the entire roaring 20s to a sudden, screeching halt.
So you gotta understand, the whole thing didn't just collapse in one day. The panic really started to bubble up on Black Thursday, October 24th. But the real knockout punch, that came 5 days later on Black Tuesday. On that single day, the market lost billions of dollars. It was a psychological shock that just shattered the optimism of an entire decade.
But why? Why was the market so fragile in the first place? Well, a huge reason was this thing called buying on margin. It let regular people buy stocks with as little as 10% down, borrowing the rest. This just fueled a massive speculative bubble. So when prices started to drop, brokers made margin calls, basically saying, pay up now. Investors had to sell their stocks to get the cash, which pushed prices down even more, which forced more selling. You see? It's this vicious cycle of collapse.
And the scale of this destruction, it was just immense. Billions of dollars in wealth just, poof, vanished. And this wasn't just some problem for Wall Street, this was a direct hit to the real economy. Consumer confidence was completely obliterated, and when people stop spending, businesses grind to a halt.
So that shockwave from the crash, it slams directly into the banking system. And this is the moment a financial crisis really starts to turn into a full-blown economic catastrophe for everyday people.
Okay, so what I love about this slide is how it breaks down what a bank run actually is. It's this terrifying feedback loop that's driven by pure fear. After the crash, people got worried their bank would fail. So what did they do? They rushed to pull out their life savings. But see, banks don't just keep all that cash in a vault, they lend it out. So to get cash for all the withdrawals, they had to sell off their assets for pennies on the dollar, which made them go broke. Fear literally became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Crazy, right?
And this right here, this shows you a massive difference between then and now. Back in the 1930s, there was no FDIC, no federal deposit insurance. If your bank went under, your life savings, gone. Just gone. Forever. That's why the panic was so unbelievably intense. Today, we have government insurance that protects most deposits, so that main reason to start a bank run, it's gone.
So you've got a market crash, you've got failing banks. That's already a total disaster, right? But believe it or not, it gets worse. The whole situation was made catastrophically worse by a series of really bad calls from the very people who were supposed to be fixing things.
Just look at this chart. At the exact moment the economy was screaming for cash, the Federal Reserve did the exact opposite of what was needed. They let the money supply shrink by almost a third. Instead of helping save the banks, they actually tightened credit. This decision is what many economists point to as the key blunder that turned what should have been a deep recession into the Great Depression.
At the very same time, another huge mistake was happening on the world stage. Congress passed something called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. The idea was, to protect American farmers and businesses by taxing imported goods. Sounds good on paper, right? Well, it backfired spectacularly. And what happened? A global trade war. Other countries immediately hit back with their own tariffs on American goods. And the effect was absolutely devastating. Check out this number. International trade just collapsed, falling by roughly 2/3. This completely choked off global commerce, spreading the economic pain to every corner of the world, and making the depression that much deeper for everyone.
Okay, so you have the crash, the bank failures, all these terrible policy decisions. But you have to remember, none of this happened in a vacuum. It was all hitting an economy that, despite its roaring reputation, was frankly way more fragile than it looked.
And this slide really lays out those deep cracks in the foundation. First off, the incredible wealth of the 1920s was super concentrated at the very top. That meant most families had very little savings or real spending power to get through a storm. Second, while the cities were roaring, farmers were already in a world of hurt. struggling with huge debts and falling prices. And finally, there was the rigid gold standard, which basically tied the government's hands. Because every dollar had to be backed by gold, the Fed couldn't just print more money to save the banks. These weren't just small problems. They were pre-existing conditions that made a total collapse almost inevitable.
So when you put all these pieces together, you don't see a single cause. What you see is a perfect economic storm, where each disaster just fed into the next, creating this downward spiral that just seemed impossible to pull out of.
All right, so let's just recap that domino effect one more time because it's so important. It all starts with that speculative stock crash, which shatters everyone's confidence and vaporizes their wealth. That fear then triggers the bank runs that wipe out the savings of millions of people. Then you have these awful policy mistakes, like shrinking the money supply and starting a trade war that just threw gasoline on the fire. And all of this happened to an economy that was already incredibly weak from inequality and other deep problems.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really important question. We've built all these safety nets, like the FDIC, and we've developed more sophisticated tools for central banks precisely because of this disaster. But when you look at the world today, you have to ask, have we truly learned the lessons we needed to? Have we done enough to prevent another perfect storm from gathering on the horizon? That's the vital question the Great Depression still asks us today.